Is this working? I think people are.
So expect the video is probably gonna.
It looks like it's working, sort of. If the video disappears, oh man. Always with the bugs, right when we begin the thing. Here, I'm gonna reload it.
Quit any second, because I think the app is having trouble. It being.
Yeah, sometimes that helps a bit. Does yours? Does that? Yeah.
Whoa, sorry. What? I'm trying to figure out what microphone it's picking up on right now. In the first, oh, it's still. I still have a live mobile session going. That's where you're getting audio from right now.
Oh, okay. Well, if that works, it works, man. Let's. If it seems to stream at the same time.
I'm sure the second we think it's all good. See, now it's down on the phone. Yeah. See the gathering, though. You know what I mean? Here, wait. Here's the line. That's all right. I'm in it, but yeah, the app.
No, it's working. It's working in the sounds, and the sounds coming through the phone. Guys, we're using the phone to test the app right now with Steven Kominski, otherwise known as Baked and Awake. It's a little bit of technical diff, but at this point, I think it's pretty close to running. I think people are even seeing it. Yeah, people are seeing it. So let me send you. You got the YouTube link, so you can see where the chat window is. Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome. I'm going to start this over because we just got this, Welcome to Recent Tartarians with Baked and Awake. I'm Andreas, and this is Steven from Baked and Awake. How's it going, Steven? Take two.
Man, I got it's interfering. Live on YouTube too. We're sorry.
Please stand by while Recent Tartarian solves all of the technical difficulties necessary for this live stream. Did you know that by taking a bath, you can save almost 100 gallons of water compared to a shower? I'm just doing my best. Check out this thing that Ian got. It's like a thing that you scratch your head with, and I'm showing. It's great. It's pretty cool. You're like, yeah, right. You know what I mean? I'm pretty sure it makes you. Probably helps with dandruff and makes you smarter. One or the other, maybe both. How's it going, Baked? Is it working? Any luck? I'm gonna take all your questions right now. In the meantime, while Baked sets this up.
Are you a phrenologist or other sort of cranium analyzer?
Not every day, but I do think that that's a real thing. I don't think it's a pseudoscience. I think it's pretty obvious that, like, if you look at a Neanderthal,
you know what? I think it was. It had some interesting aspects to it.
Yeah.
The old phrenology. So what am I hearing? Am I hearing playback from something else on my end?
Yep.
This is exactly what's going on.
That's your YouTube. Yeah.
There you go. I just shut that up. And
well, now that everyone's fully baked and fully awake, I think.
Oh my God. See, we had to go through the complete debacle. So I had to go ahead and take mobile out of the equation for today, I hope.
Hey, it was a test. We're running all these tests. This is the thing. Like, somebody's got to make something that works, and like the only way to make it is to test it. So we're doing that. And if you're, we
were almost successful with the full video conference there.
It's true. I mean, at the beginning there, people saw your face, so it's in there. So it worked. And you can always log back in and do that again for a vanity session. But you now also have access to your screen share, which is not a bad deal, because everybody loves, to be able to share stuff. But I wanted to introduce you to the world. I might have to retell that story, basically, because it kind of got all shut down. So I'm going to say it again.
I agree. Anybody who went
really downhill really fast, actually.
So, but I'm gonna tell that story a little bit differently, because the way I met you was basically like I was some kid punk on the internet who's like, hey, I've been places, I saw stuff that looked different, and I agree with like whatever the heck is going on. And I don't know what it is, but I disagree with the narrative. And then I started making some videos, and then all of a sudden Baked and Awake showed up. He's like, dude, you're awesome. I support your whole thing. And I was like, like, rad, thank you. And and then he was like, and I made a video, you should check it out. And I was like, yeah. And I looked at it, and he'd been making like some of the best content. And he's one of the most like, he's in the spirit of what we're doing, because there's a lot of people that are in research that are like trying to not talk to other people so that they don't have to share in the glory of search or something. I'm not sure what it is, but it's not the ethos that we share, which is like we're trying to work with each other, find out more, not get stuck in our own little boxes, which is what I think they're putting us into, smaller and smaller boxes. So it's better to talk to people that are as different as possible, right? Like we were talking to guys that do anti-gravity and are as not baked and awake as possible. I mean, they're awake in their own way, but they're seeing things that are different. So, but Baked and Awake's been doing some pretty crazy videos. And what was funny was this dude who is he's pretty famous, because in 2008 he made like Esoteric Agenda, Ungrip, Kymatica. They're a pretty big set of like the early conspiracy documentaries that were happening at that time. And he's on Gaia and things like that. This guy Ben Stewart, and he came over to the studio and he was talking to me. Didn't know who I was, didn't know who he was at the time, but I'd seen his videos, but I didn't remember it was him. He'd said, hey, like, what do you do? I'm like, I'm interested in ancient history. He's like, what kind? I'm like, well, there's this thing, long story short, Tartaria. And then he's like, Tartaria? I've heard of Tartaria. I love Tartaria. What do you think of the mud flood? And what do you believe about flamenco and the timeline? And I was like, what? Like, how is it possible that this is happening, that so many people are into it? And this guy is a big guy, And I'm like, well, what other things have you seen that you've seen about this? Like, well, not a lot yet. But I did watch this one guy I really like, Baked and Awake. So I thought it was just crazy. Like at the end of the day, like you're making waves, man. You're impacting people with your material. So it's really rad.
That's just awesome. I can't even believe that you got to have that experience and could relate it back to me. That makes me stoked, obviously, because I do boost you up all the time when we chat over in the Discord community, but I do because I mean it. You make some of the best content on Tartaria and on esoteric, like coded symbolism that relates back to so many other related areas that we all love looking at together. That's super rad to me. And yeah, we're just getting started on that front. I think in the community, the Discord community in particular, like, thank you for saying that I have that spirit of sharing, but that's one that's shared by many members of that community. And it's incredible in there. You can't hardly get out of that place without stumbling across, 3 or 4 knowledge bombs a day of stuff that any of us hasn't seen before. It blows me away where these people are, digging and coming up with what do you have in that Discord? We've got maps, we've got photographs, we've got whole archives of old documents, books, links to repositories of hundreds and thousands of books that different users have shared on several different occasions. I've gotten like 2 new libraries out of that community. More material than I can read probably in a lifetime already. So having too much fun.
We need to figure out how to put it into like a book form. I think that's another thing we're going to try to figure out. And I want to do something like a graphic novel or something, so we can start doing more illustrations about and bringing this all together into something like a coffee table compendium or something.
That's an awesome idea. I hadn't even thought about a graphic novel type format. God, that's
yeah.
Weird, though.
And we want to keep in Creative Commons and stuff and make it like available so people can like continue to work on the idea of Tartary. It seems like you've been into this, like a lot of people, like we all came from different walks of life that led us to say, hey, I've seen all this stuff that relates back to this Tartary thing. Like I guess you're from like not even far from where I am right now, right? Like because I'm like 20 minutes across the lake or whatever from across the Long Island Strait. What's it called? Yeah.
Well, so you're up in Massachusetts right now, right?
I'm in Connecticut.
Oh, okay.
There
we go.
I'm like right across from Long Island. Yeah.
Yeah, because people who live, in different parts of Long Island and Staten Island and the different boroughs, many of them work up in Westchester County, up in Connecticut, as you know.
Yeah.
Up there,
which is cool. I like it. I like I like the vibe. It's pretty great. It's kind of like here's kind of green and trees, but like it's really close to New York, and so like that's nice. It's good. But so you grew up on this coast. So I'm all here like Indiana Jones finding like X marks the spot with all these mud flood buildings and bricks, but you grew up around them. So like what did you see like as a kid that like led you, bummer with the mines and the we're gonna get there. So did you guys know that this is a Bobisha straw? A Bobisha straw is a straw that you use for yerba mate. And
there we go. Yerba mate. I will not press that button again.
I was just trying to make sure that like there was an intermission while you were doing that. I was like, all right, I got stuff at all. I've got a few things here on my table for show and tell.
I was closing all my tabs and getting ready to screen share for you guys, and I clicked the button on the Minds tab. It was a bad button.
Bad button to click.
It took me away. It was the take me away button. So I'm back. So
you got to be careful, man. You don't want to get taken away these days. Not to where we're going.
I should have, been a good conspiracy theorist and come back with, they're fucking with me. They're fucking with my connection. I don't know what's going on. I've been hacked.
Yeah, right.
Oh my God.
Well, that's actually, I don't want to skip too far ahead because I do want to ask you about what you grew up around, but I also want to say it's interesting that you went pro instead of con in terms of conspiracy. You know what I mean? Like you're a positive mind user.
Oh, I know I'm the worst. I believe almost everything to a certain extent because none of them have been fully disproven to me, to my satisfaction. That's the problem with me. Yeah. So I'm probably, just a credulous dipshit when it comes to a lot of stories that I shouldn't really believe. So
it's good to entertain thoughts for a while. You just can't get so invested that people get hurt. But what is it that you saw as a kid that was like in Long Island, and around the New York area that like didn't look like it was, it didn't seem patently to be the way you were told, and that maybe it was Tartarian or something like that, Tartarian.
Well, so naturally, this subject matter as a complete gestalt, like as a holistic, viewable idea that you can step back from and have a couple of names for, like Tartaria, like mud flood, civilization resets, whether it's orphan trains or Antiquitech or, the creation of the Federal Reserve or the depopulation of the American West or, whatever part of the story, you're digging in on, wherever angle people are coming at from. We've had this. It's been around forever. We just haven't had these names for it, and we haven't had a picture like we have today. That's probably been made possible by the modern internet and the types of dynamic conversations that people can have online, and the rate at which people can iterate content as well, like really compelling content and educational content in a lot of ways. Like people can knock people for watching YouTube videos and getting fired up all they want, but every single one of those people who is quick to criticize is being reductionist. They don't really know that the people that they're denigrating are only watching YouTube videos and never read a book and never go out of their house and look around in their own environment and discuss this with trusted friends who might very well be critical of their theories and, subject themselves to their own forms of peer review, that might be available to them to higher levels of rigor. People don't know what other people are capable of. People are, happy to dismiss conspiracy theorists for being crackpots, but we all know time and again that so many shocking and disappointing and miserable conspiracies have turned out to be not only like true things that have happened in the past in history, but they're still going on all around us today. Companies, governments, high profile groups and individuals get busted for this shit continuously. And they even show us in the news constantly. And we just let it ride. We let it slide. We just keep on trucking. So yeah, I'm having fun with the fact that with a podcast name like Baked and Awake, I'm not in too much danger of being taken too horribly seriously by too many people. So hopefully everything will be that I present is certainly understood, to be coming from a person who spent time and who continues to spend time looking into increasingly, like this subject matter that we happen to have in common these days, that centers around the Tartarian mystery. And I'm rambling, and I'm sorry.
No, I mean that's you answer like the why we are all here kind of question. Like we're working on making videos for the same kind of reason. Like you said at one point that you didn't really you used to like mainstream sardonic Pravda propaganda, like like Jon Stewart and the Young Turks and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because Jon Stewart in some ways is kind of an interesting guy, but like you kind of have to be once you start making money in Hollywood. It's funny, a lot of them turn they go from there being super liberal to being a little conservative. Like you'll see like people like Bill Maher, people like Dennis Miller is the best example.
Yep.
But I was gonna even think like people like Seinfeld and Rob Schneider recently. Rob Schneider recently said that being a Californian's like dating an abusive relationship with someone who spends all your money, you don't know where it's going, and then they're out all the time, and when they come home there might be like a bunch of homeless people partying inside, and it was like an interesting thing for Rob Schneider to say, because it was like that's out of character with what we would have thought he would have done in the early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
But the same thing with John Lovitz. John Lovitz eventually even got pushed out of the limelight for becoming like that. But Young Turks is a weird one because Young Turks, I mean, even the name being about the Armenian Holocaust, it's kind of edgy. It's like it's on the wrong side of that metaphor too. But so I never really like trusted. I mean, at one point I almost worked for them, and I decided when I was at CNN, and I had a friend who was working for the Dr. Drew show that went over there, and when she did, I was like thinking about it, but it was just so their whole like rhetoric was so clearly scary then. And by that point, like anything that the Daily Show does, like Jon Stewart, even into the new version, they continually. They say things that are so absurd that couldn't possibly be news, that it has to be a comedy show. And that used to make some amount of sense because it was a good mind control tactic. But now it's just straight up like they tell you, this is what's going on in the world and you need to think this is absurd. Because they don't even have jokes anymore. So they're just like, the world is absurd. We must fix it this way, and then we move on. And it just reminds me of like a Soviet Stalin meeting, kind of like a speech, it goes on. But
well, I mean, I doubt that there exists like a unless on the Internet Archive there's like actual sequential shows from them from during that 2016 election cycle. But I watched every single one of them from Jank on down go from practically getting Bernie tattoos early on in the coverage to
feel that burn,
watching them completely get like somehow like it was like they got mind flipped overnight to Bernie's unelectable. It's over. Anybody who still wants to support Bernie is an idiot. You're going to throw your vote away. It was the full court press guilt attack against Bernie from so early on, and with a like exactly matched unwillingness to pursue the what the fuck just happened in the DNC here that made this possible. They didn't want it. They didn't talk about it. And up until that moment, there again, being a credulous dipshit, as I claim to be at times, I was loving them. They felt like the real news to me. They felt like and sounded like my friends, like they were reporting the real news and telling it different than every other outlet that we were stuck looking at all the time. But it was just one of those moments for me that I've had just a few times in my life where you see something for what it is finally, and you're like, oh man, look at all of this. And it, it broke me for all those other old favorites at that point in time. All these like, wry, sardonic comedy, news, commentary, like bastions that people love to idolize these days. Because you're right, it makes it really easy to help people know what to think and know what's going to make them be all right in mixed company and not be some outspoken kook who's got questions. Because I don't claim to have all sorts of answers for folks, whether it's about mud flood or any of the topics I might have talked about on the podcast over the last couple of years. But yeah.
So what led you into like the Tartaria thing recently? Like, how did it start for you?
So
mud flood.
I don't know that yours was the first videos that I saw about mud flood. I want to say New Earth channels, like There Are No Forests on Flat Earth, led me to a almost direct rabbit hole to their research that dovetailed in directly with the mud flood narrative, and then other channels started popping up. But yours was one of the first, and you had already done a few videos. You had at least 10 or 12 up probably at the time that I found your channel. So I was stoked because I was like, here's this dude, he's relatable. And you had all that cool esoteric angle that you bring to things where you just see these affinities between the symbolism that we see depicted in the classic art and architecture, and then showing it to us over and over again in all our favorite TV shows, movies, and animated favorites. So, which is always nuts to me because we consume so much of that media. We all do. Cable cutters or not, we all have 3 or 4 streaming subscription services. You and I both already have the dang Disney Plus in the house. I've got kids around here. My wife signed up for that shit day one.
Yeah, and that's the other funny thing. Both of us, we have people to sign up for it around us, and then so that was the thing. I didn't sign up for any of this stuff, but I did accept the obligation of the commercial code, I guess, by being a member of the nucleus that is.
There you go. There you go.
But yeah, Disney Plus is pretty gnarly, man. I mean, did you see the Mandalorian?
Yeah, I mean, we both enjoyed that. I love that. I can't wait for the next one to come out. I rewatched both of the first 2 episodes with my wife so that she could get fully up to speed, and she's in.
Dave Filoni is a genius. Like, he's the guy. He did Avatar: The Last Airbender, and then he did Star Wars: Clone Wars, and he really, I think he brought it pretty hard with the Mandalorian. It's not, nothing's perfect, but I think it's going to be interesting. I guess we're not allowed to do spoilers or what? I don't know, but maybe it's not the most important.
The whole internet is full of Baby Yoda memes, so there's not much to spoil there.
Boomer Yoda, Baby Yoda.
Have Disney Plus probably went over somebody's house to try to watch Mandalorian already. What I mean? So if they haven't seen anything else,
to pivot from Star Wars though for a minute, like the other thing I liked about Disney Plus is it has a lot of their old stuff on there. The entire Mickey Mouse Club is on there from the 50s, and a bunch of their old. I think there's about 4 things that I haven't even seen.
There we go.
Which is Are
they hosting? Do they have all that old Ozzie and Harriet content and Leave It to Beaver and Mr. Ed stuff that they used to run on Disney Channel on there? I haven't seen all that yet.
No, I don't think so. But I don't suppose they own Mr. Ed. I think
maybe not.
Yeah, but maybe they do now. I don't know. We could look at some point. I'm sure that will happen.
That stuff all gets consolidated.
But you got to get a Kodi box, man. You get the Kodi, and you get repositories, and they have IPTV streams where you watch 24-hour-a-day Ninja Turtles. Like, I've got streams of Ninja Turtles and Rick and Morty and things. Also, the new Rick and Morty came out. You saw the 4th season, episode 1. Did you see that yet?
I'm like 3 seasons behind on Rick and Morty. Dude, that show got dark.
It's very dark.
Morty.
Very dark. Yeah.
You know what I watch is I watch Rick and Morty like decoded videos instead.
Absolutely.
So I let them spoil it all for me, and just like I like to watch it from that layer back because I'm like, ooh, oh, Rick, you're a bastard. Fuck.
Yeah. I mean, it gets tedious because it's just another wave of American Dad in South Park. But like, there is some interesting stuff about linear timelines, and this recent episode goes into the fascism and things like that, which is kind of an interesting thing.
No, they're wild, and I mean, that's the thing. They're mining, fertile ground there by basically doing. What are they doing? Are they doing psychology on us at the same time that they're presenting philosophy?
Yeah, they're creating sort of a imprint by doing it, though, right? Because what they're doing, they're saying this is the way things work, and a lot of you believe it. So it's a collective consciousness, and then if this happens, that happens, and this happens. The most recent episode's interesting because he looks at a omega point. Like Morty wants to go towards this final destiny that he could have. And so he starts not living in the present in order to, he's like missing opportunities because like this girl's like, come be with me for today. And he's like, I can't because I see that someday in the future I might meet you maybe in my 40s. And I want that moment to be perfect. So I'm going to follow this trajectory and sacrifice the present. Meanwhile, Rick is constantly living in the present and not looking enough towards the future. So there's this kind of this thing where it's like, is there an omega point, and is there a final destination? It's the ultimate destination of the universe from that the alpha originates from, in an omega point. So they are showing a lot of like real philosophy, but yeah, then they're using that like kind of the way like some cults use, real things in order to sell less real things,
Well, I mean, maybe that's why I reacted so viscerally to it, that I have to watch it from the, removed layer of listening to another YouTuber explain the plot line to me and just show me super short clips, because I can't hang with a whole episode of that show in a lot of cases, just because it just creeps me out and freaks me out at times.
Yeah, it's smart.
And I love it. And I love it too. Like it's also brilliantly done. And
you saw the pedophile thing that Hammond made, right? Dan Hammond made this
yes, and that definitely
art film
paints it massively for me.
Yeah.
Like what are you supposed to do with that?
No, you're supposed to know about it and tell everyone you know about it, basically.
Yeah.
I think that's the first step.
Yeah. So that's a big reason probably also that, I wasn't saying it and in the moment the disturbing plot lines were more than enough to stand on their own. But yeah, it's not a good look. That was a creepy ass video, So
I agree.
It was super wrong. Like, what the fuck are you doing, dude?
So what do you think in general? Like, do you think that there's a level where there's a bunch of people that are just surrounding the most evil people? Like, it seems like there's some pretty evil people out there. Do you think that there's other people like in Hollywood that are just so nepotistic that they just kind of like they surround themselves around it? Or do you think that it's just that just kind of culminates in the way that the church for a long time has culminated pedophiles? Maybe Hollywood's built the same way or in enough of a similar way that it's happening. What do you think's going on?
I mean, I think it's clear to everybody that something, namely an entire culture of predatory and like exploitative and often like that results in death kind of trauma is allowed to be perpetrated against youth in all of these different areas, these areas that are, somehow magical, right? Like if you're in the church, you're supposed to be in the safest place on earth. And if you're in entertainment and you're at all successful, similarly, right? Like it's supposed to bring you, fame and fortune and money enough to share with your family and make them happy and safe as well. And those people should be the happiest, safest, funnest people in the world. If the thing that's sold is, to us as being the case is true. And yet over and over again, what do we have to share with your family and make them happy and safe as well? And we got a little delay going on here. Who just joined us?
That would be me, Jeremiah.
Jeremiah, how are you?
Doing well. You guys are having a great conversation.
Thank you. Can you mute the tab that's got us in it? There we go. Perfect. So yeah, I think we were talking about what's going on, right? With whether it's the church or whether it's kids or whether, kids in Hollywood or adults in Hollywood for that matter. I mean, we look around, it's just everywhere. You can't go a day without seeing one of these stories. There was just another Catholic bishop who was busted for this.
Actually, here in Connecticut, there was one just like a couple weeks ago too, just about New Haven.
That's probably the one that I'm referring to. It just never seems to stop, you guys. It's sad because I grew up in, for example, traditional Episcopal upbringing. And by the way, Andreas, I will say this in coming back around for one brief second on your earlier question. The building that I grew up going to church in on Sundays, and my mom was pretty good about making us go, not overly, like we didn't go in the middle of the week or anything. We're just Episcopalian, so we'd show up on Sundays. And every once in a while we'd prevail upon her to not go for various excuses or reasons, but not too often. And I had a great upbringing in that church. I learned a lot about the traditional Western Christian, history and religion. I made it through confirmation and everything. Was a pretty decent Bible student, if annoying to my youth pastors and stuff with my questions and stuff. But the church that we went to was St. George's Episcopal, and it was built in like the 1850s. And it's a super mud floody, amazing church with a like 2-story pipe organ in it. It's got all the awesome Antiquitech hallmarks like aerials and stuff like that. It's got the graveyard right around the church, right in the middle of Hempstead, Long Island there. And so as soon as I started looking into Tartaria and thinking back to my childhood, that was one of the most accessible and one of the most, I can still tell you the entire layout of that building. I could walk it, in my mind right now with my eyes closed from, top to bottom. And I did the whole altar boy thing and everything. And nobody ever fondled me. Nobody ever tried anything. I don't think that church, our particular church, has ever had a, scandal that I knew of the entire time any of us were growing up in it. But at the same time, I have to remain deeply skeptical and wary of organized religion when I even think about bringing my family to church in my adult life now. We don't practice. We don't go to church.
Trusting in other individuals, I think, is the bigger issue than any of it. It has less to do, I think, with, which religion or which organization as it does in putting power outside of yourself, particularly if you're a father or a mother of a child.
Right.
And it's a lot of trust to trust other people with your kids. And I've never heard of it being like, a thing that parents ever don't regret spending more time with their kids when they were young. So it's like, if you can really bust it out and go to college afterwards, that's usually like what it seems like is the right thing to do, is have your kids spend 6 years like intensively with them, at least, so that you really ingrain in them, to be self-protective and critical and aware and questioning of the media and of the people taller than them.
Well, they certainly did. My parents had a level of awareness that was high enough to say, don't believe everything you see and don't believe everything you read, by all means. But my mother wasn't any more appreciative of my questions about, the resurrection and different things that I found interesting and perplexing in the Bible at the time.
Do you think there's a lot about the Bible that kind of like led you to the deluge and the mud flood and things like that? Because there's a flood in the Bible, mud flood. Do you think they're connected to you?
Yeah, no, I've had to come back and look at the Bible a lot more in the last year or so since looking into this topic. And maybe that's, I mean, when we're talking about Tartaria and mud flood and everything that surrounds it, as we talked about, Antiquitech, whatever it might be, whatever your bailiwick is that you really love, like this stuff we're dealing with a historical narrative that you have to look mostly backwards to verify against documents that you thought you were taught about when you were a kid, but probably weren't. Other ones that you absolutely never heard of, so you don't know what level of fidelity or credibility they have, and you need to vet that for yourself on a case by case. And people on the outside look at this as, a pretty preposterous area of study. They think it's absolutely ridiculous. They see nothing where we see very interesting things worthy of discussion, and they're quick to, again, be reductionist and relate us back to other types of topics and instantly say, oh, well, you believe in that mud flood, so I guess you're a flat earther then too, huh? It's always the very first thing out of people's mouths. And we know people love taking low hanging fruit like that every opportunity they get. As we were talking about earlier with like the Young Turks and other popular, comedian news armchair quarterbacks.
Or believing in flying saucers and, tinfoil hats, which, by the way, I think I should start selling tinfoil hats. I'm going to start making hats that have tinfoil on the inside, so only you're crazy. And that'll be nice. I think
you've been beat to market on those. I think you can buy them right now.
Oh, dear. Okay.
I think you get Xirtus.
Will they look as cool as mine?
Get Xirtus branded
all right.
Merch with foil lining, and I'll probably buy one, frankly, if you get a good one.
All right, I'll make sure it's the coolest.
Make sure it's primo.
I promise it's the best. I'll do that.
What's up? We got Jeremiah on video. We got live feed.
Yeah, Jeremiah, you're muted. You have to unmute. Sorry. Click the unmute button. You're muted.
Because I told him to mute his tab earlier because it seemed like he was like 10 seconds behind and we were still hearing like us talk.
Yeah. You might need to exit out and re-enter the call, Jeremiah, if you're trying to.
Your video quality improved quite a bit. You were looking really low res earlier. Oh, yeah. I went from LD to HD. Oh, I'm toggling back and forth between the two. It's gone back and forth.
That makes sense.
You just got for a minute there.
Well, this is an interesting thing about the Minds Gathering is that anyone that is got the link to the Minds can get into the Minds thing. So now Jeremiah's joined us. And if you guys remember, Jeremiah was here the other day. So this is a surprise. I'm really excited that you stopped by. He's the anti-gravity expert from the lab.
Wow.
So I don't know. I figured
anyways.
So wait, are we talking like Dr. Eric Laithwaite anti-gravity or what?
No, we're talking. Well, Laithwaite had done some pretty interesting stuff with magnetics, and you can't deny his understanding of the moving magnetic field, or the magnetic river, as he likes to put it. It's basically a linear version of Tesla's induction motor, and both of them are pretty revolutionary. The big difference being that Laithwaite was taking advantage of eddy currents within conductive materials and using that not just for propulsion, but for lift as well to reduce friction, which does go beyond what Tesla was attempting to do with just the alternating current motor and that scheme. But no, my research has more to do with T.T. Brown and Tesla's early discoveries of the ether and the way that it can be saturated with magnetic flux and be pushed against. So what we really focus on doing is trying to cram enough energy into space that it simply saturates, and that energy, while it's traveling through space, does have an equivalent mass that we can push against. But we don't have to expend any propellant to do it. We just have to create a strong enough magnetic field that we have a reference point that we can now use.
Wow. Hey, so that reminds me of, so this would work, you're saying, in vacuum.
Yeah, it works in vacuum or in full atmosphere. It technically works while surrounded by matter. and the effects are even stronger. The thing is, when you have matter, you have all these little electric fields from the protons and the electrons that are constantly traveling outwards at the speed of light, and that increases the density of space in that area, which is why light slows down as it moves through an area where mass is.
So it works better out of a vacuum, works better in mass. It would be like really useful around like in our highways.
Yeah, anything that works in vacuum will also work in the presence of mass better. But there are certain things that the technology which works in vacuum relies on the vacuum for, which is like insulation of the high voltages, or complete removal of moisture, stuff like that, which just comes along with the territory of the vacuum, which you can engineer into any design, but you have to be considerate of the fact that atmosphere is conductive and that it is saturated with EM, and that you have to at least deal with the fact these fields exist and account for them, or your numbers are going to be way off, and you may end up with nowhere near as much force as you thought you were going to get, because you didn't put enough energy in to compensate for the increase in mass due to the oxygen, nitrogen, carbon dioxide, and other gases in the atmosphere if you operate this within Earth's atmosphere.
So
it works either way.
It sounds like you're describing a system that's not theoretical. It sounds like are any of these modeled?
Oh yeah, this is not it's not theoretical. It's just a It's just a derivation of the equations that have been used for almost 100 years, and this stuff goes back to Maxwell, which is obviously older than that. But Maxwell had figured out a couple of things about space and time and its saturation. He has over 20 equations in total, and they deal with things like space-time curl and magnetic saturation. They deal with the transform, later realized. So when you come down to the Lorentz transform and Maxwell's equations, all this stuff is well recognized in physics, and we have to constantly compensate for these factors. It's just that I don't think anybody's really tried to use it for propulsion. Even though the mathematics work out and the equations are there, they have been there, and there's nothing stopping us. It's just like nobody's really bothered to try to get enough energy there. And I think the problem is the materials that we have available today. We just don't have switches fast enough to conduct that much current and that much voltage in a short enough period of time. And we don't have other technologies that can be used in place of electricity as a means of repulsion. So right now we're sort of fighting the material sciences and trying to get semiconductors that are quick, since that seems to be the main technology of this era. And it was a lot easier when we had tubes. Like I have a huge box of high power radio transmitter tubes, and I've had more success, I think, with those than I have with the semiconductors, just because they're faster. You don't have to deal with a PN or NP junction. You don't have to deal with capacitive loading, because capacitance on tubes is almost nil. I mean, it practically doesn't exist, so your speeds are really, really quick. But the trouble with tubes is they're not very good at conducting electricity. Even at the very best, they're still over 10,000 times worse at conducting electricity in high current situations than semiconductors. So it's like the catch-22, where you lie in the middle and try to idealize a technology which is not really idealized for what you want to do.
Well, right, in addition to being too big for the application under any circumstance.
Exactly. So it's a fight of materials.
Interesting.
Do you remember Dudley Buck's cryotron?
I do not know about Dudley Buck's or cryotron, but I would love to hear about it.
I'll send you a link to it. And anybody listening, I would say check out Dudley Buck's cryotron. You can find IEEE.spectrum has an article, Dudley Buck's Forgotten Cryotron Computer in the 1950s. Let me see if I can get that. I'm going to try to open up the picture in my computer. Where it is, right there.
Yeah, that'd be great, because I do not have an IEEE account, and I know how tight they are about like releasing your documents without.
I know, right? What a bummer. It's like
it sucks because there's so many documents I come across on this site that I just want to get my hands on, but I'm not going to pay $30 for something that I don't know what it contains.
Well, here's the deal about IEEE is everything it's got is, the best. But yeah,
it is good stuff. It's peer reviewed and it's pretty much validated. Yeah. So you go and know you're going to get something, but is it
better It's a better investment than Netflix. Well, Dudley Buck's Forgotten Cryotron in the 1950s. This MIT graduate student convinced engineers to build a computer using superconducting magnetic switches instead of tubes or transistors. Immediately following the Second World War, electrical engineer grappled with fundamental but open question: how should electronic digital compute be built, and which kind of switch would serve the best for logic circuits? They quickly settled on vacuum tube, but there were some other options. The earliest one had pneumatic mercury-filled pipes, spinning drums covered with magnetic paint. But in the early 1950s, the technical community began to converge on another memory technology of magnetic cores. These small rings of ferromagnetic material each held a single bit of data when magnetized in one direction to another. I hope everyone gets where we're going with this, but it's basically the liquid terminator. There was a lot of technology that was worked in ferrofluid. I think a lot of people have seen art made of ferrofluid, which are looking to electroliquid magnetic cryotron.
How old is ferrofluid now?
This was some real technology at the time. I'm just looking at a picture of this. Book holds a splinter-sized cryotron prototype along with a bulkier vacuum tube and a transistor. Man, this cryotron prototype is tiny as hell.
At 1948, when he graduated from Washington University with a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering, he joined Navy's Cryptological Organization in Washington, D.C., where he worked with early digital computers 1 year after 1947 and 1948. Okay. In 1950, he moved to MIT and began graduate studies in electrical engineering under Arthur von Hippel. Do you guys remember Arthur von Hippel? He was one of the most important German-American material scientists. He was a Prussian scientist who worked in semiconductors and ferroelectric materials from the 1898 till 2003. That's 105 years old. This guy lived to be 105 years old. So just remember, Arthur Hippel's important, and he was the guy who learned a lot about electricity, and he lived a really long time after learning a lot about electricity and magnets. And he believed some crazy, kooky, kind of Dr. Bronner-esque stuff about magnetism. But this cryotron is a futuristic ferrofluid machine that uses magnets to get very cold, from the Greek root cryo, and electronics. Then he died suddenly and mysteriously at a very young age, the end. So thought you guys might want to know about that. That's worth knowing about. Oh yeah, and NSA and people are still researching it, and Google probably got quantum supremacy by using something that had something to do with this technology. That's my opinion.
Yeah, somebody recently refuted their quantum supremacy claim. Wasn't it IBM? They were like, that's bullshit.
Well, it's like, what can you do? What can you do with quantum supremacy? It's like,
test. Yeah, what are you going to do with that?
Yeah, I mean, but the thing is, quantum supremacy can be. The thing is, IBM has had photonic machines since 2010, at least, that they can use traditional fab processes to build. So it's not hard for them to just start using photonics electricity, and that boosts you about 8 times as much data as you'd have through electricity to have light that has spectrums. So they're and that's just that. So they have some thoughts on quantum supremacy themselves, and but everybody does. The thing is, it looks to me like quantum supremacy was achieved a long time ago, and that's what blockchain is kind of for, is this fragmentation packet protocol system to decrypt passwords and decrypt encrypted data for a large network of quantum computers.
Now, who was it? Was it Google or was it somebody else? Was it D-Wave who just supposedly mined a whole shitload of crypto in just a few seconds?
I think it might have been D-Wave. I wouldn't be surprised if I'm sure Google's doing it also.
So, though, doesn't something like a true practical application, real-world application breakthrough like that for quantum computing, in the case of any of these like camps that we just mentioned, whether it's Google, whether it's Amazon, let's not leave them out, D-Wave, IBM, whoever owns Cray, which is, used to be on their own, but has been gobbled up just recently, finally, right? Somebody owns Cray now. Any of these firms who are, likely to be able to do something with quantum computing real world, wouldn't that herald like the end of like crypto in the way that we've known up till now? Because what other worse instant transfer of wealth could be possible than some quantum AI that can outmine every other computer in the world?
Maybe in the way boomers look at it, Heyo. Sorry, I'm just kidding.
No.
But like the thing about blockchain is that it had a really like surreptitious beginning that no one talks about anyway. Like they're all like, oh, it was a cute hacker. You know, he was probably handsome. It was the dude you're getting Adele guy, right? Like, you know, somebody. No, it was not a Japanese guy.
Right.
Like it was
Satoshi. Whatever.
Well, it was Satoshi. It was Samsung, Toshiba, Naka, Motorola, Nakishi
Right,
Motorola.
I've heard that.
It is that the Moore's law needed a reason to be met because technology was slowing down because of economics, and people were starting to like there's no reason because you don't need that much. You know, most people don't need that much power in their phone. Like most people, and trying to convince people they do is harder and harder. Because even like the dude who's got like the golf club fetish that he has to have the fanciest phone doesn't really need it. He needs it to convince the girl, the premium Snapchat model from Russia that, you know, he's fancy. Like we're running out of reasons to buy crap, you know, and dull razors to be replaced with new Motorola razors. So they needed something. And the NSA and whomever, let's just say like Five Eyes and the agencies that were doing trades needed something other than banks that they could send. Blockchain was the perfect system, and it was developed for that purpose. I'm pretty sure, because you can pay out in blockchain. And yeah, I mean, like the majority of people using blockchain that you know might have been on on drugs on the internet, but like for the most part, it's Pete's. Like there was like if you remember at the beginning of it in 2009 or something, 8 out of 10. I remember there's people that were all about pizza stores that were accepting blockchain.
Were they already?
Pizza stores. And so the whole pizza thing, I think also if you start looking into how much blockchain money certain pizza places, right? Pizza places had, right? I hope I'm being clear. But
I think we get what you're talking about.
Like, but there's
how many people don't know about that stuff yet. It's kind of amazing.
Yeah, right.
And disturbing that it's going on, and people just have lost sight of it. Because it was a big deal. It was a big deal a while back when it first came out. It was on the news everywhere, and it was worldwide, not just here in the U.S. Even though it happened here in the U.S. mainly, but then it just all but disappeared. And we were just having this conversation, my girlfriend and I, 2 days ago, about how easy it seems for major pieces of history to completely sidestep our awareness as a culture and yet be allowed to still be a problem.
Yeah, we can pretend a lot of the time that nothing's going on until it reminds us of stuff. I think a lot of people see the like the analogy to drug dealers selling pizzas for drugs, you know, before marijuana was legal, I think. And so a lot of people specifically would remember, like, when they heard that it reminded them of speaking in code from personal experience. And so a lot of the world also is in a circumstance where trafficking is a problem. Girls in the Ukraine told that they're going to be hairdressers in Sweden, you know, and disappeared. Venezuelan women and children. But what I guess this is kind of tangential, but since we went there, I find it also interesting that the Me Too movement and the Epstein thing focus around adult women, or even, you know, hebephilia, which is like teenage puberty, not as much talking about the bigger issue, in my opinion. I mean, it's not necessarily, I mean, it's at least as big, and it's a huge part of the full issue, which are children, which are prepubescent and babies.
Kids.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible to know what the real number is on how many kids have disappeared. I've heard numbers well over 100,000. I don't know if any of those are true because it's virtually impossible to figure that out. But the numbers are nevertheless
every year
staggering.
It's like a harvest every year, you know, and it's something that they try to kind of hide. But if you look at like in the 80s and 90s, what's interesting is when people started focusing on the media of the number of missing kids, that's also when they started this sort of movement of Hollywood is giving kids nightmares. And it's making them believe that horrible things are happening. That, you know,
and video games are turning children into murderers, of course.
Yeah, and so it's like
all these external things. Don't be a parent. You know, don't teach your kids one way or the other. Just blame it on something else outside yourself. At
that point, then they started making media actually do that more, because they're like, hey, let's imprint this stuff. We'll teach kids we'll trigger kids with responses so they know not to trust the right people and to trust the wrong people. In Sesame Street, for the longest time, there was a situation where Big Bird was friends with an imaginary character called Snuffleupagus. And Snuffleupagus, no one ever...
Imaginary?
Well, so here's the thing. Originally, he wasn't... no one ever believed him. But Big Bird was always off with Snuffleupagus, this giant, phallic mammoth. And it's off of, in New York City somewhere. And he disappears for hours or days at a time. And he comes home. He's like, I was with this giant guy who's, from the prehistoric, he's ancient, is this ancient giant guy who's Snuffleupagus, even the name, Snuff. And they're like, sure, Big Bird, whatever, Big Bird. Up until at some point, like, they were worried, they said, that there was a kid who was molested in New York City, and he'd been telling people, and no one believed him. And so they were worried that they were perpetuating kids not being believed and knowing that they wouldn't be believed, because what a ridiculous thing to believe in Snuffleupagus. And so eventually they introduced Snuffleupagus to be a real character. He takes them to meet him and everything. But that's all of that imprinting in the 80s.
Strikingly large and possibly considerable knowledge on Snuffleupagus and Sesame Street, man.
Oh, you have no idea. Yeah, good to meet you.
I don't.
It's weirder.
That's great. I don't know anybody more educated on the history of Snuffleupagus than yourself, my friend.
That's probably the most I know about Snuffleupagus, to be fair.
Well,
that's the story that sticks out.
To take it from there and bring it to the present day, my 7-year-old and 3-year-old sons both have a strong bias towards, for example, being fans of and liking and doing playing games with the Pennywise character. And they have, the 7-year-old is the one who has like some of these Pennywise collectibles that are like action figures. And, my wife probably got them for him at some point in time. It's no biggie, whatever. But, they're playing the frickin' Georgie in the sewer scene out over and over again. And he's even got the 3-year-old involved in the play. Naturally he makes him be Georgie, of course. But, they both want to watch creepy shows until we put them on, and then they're too scary, thank God. But they both like to watch YouTube clips of, like, Five Nights at Freddy's. You guys know that one, probably.
Yeah.
And, other stuff like that. Some other...
How old are your kids again?
7 and 3.5.
So when I was 8, I loved Gotcha, Terminator, and Porky's. So just
Gotcha
be careful.
Was amazing. I loved Linda Fiorentino, as I know you did too.
Yeah,
even
still do.
8-year-old. Absolutely.
It's interesting, Baked. When my brother was 4 and I was 8, we watched. I think it was that age. Maybe it was a little bit longer. Anyways, we watched Jurassic Park, and of course, we played out those scenes and other scenes in movies too. So, like, that's normal kid stuff. Being creative and trying to imagine yourself in a situation that you'll never be in. It certainly does help to grow the modeling parts of the mind that deal with consideration of a large variety of factors. And I know that it's just play right now, but that stuff becomes a real skill later in life.
Yeah, I think it's really sad they're taking away scary and dark. And I mean, like, I don't know. I grew up in probably one of the darkest media periods for children since the 1800s. But, like, the media is so amazing. Like, we're back with the dinosaur movie with the dude who's eaten by crows and his twin brother's got one eye. It's Screw. And, like, every little thing that they did for us was full of monsters and scary animals, like, growling. And, like, that's the thing about the Disney Plus, man. Like, your kids are going to see probably like The Fox and the Hound. And it gets pretty heavy. Well, I remember being traumatized by Lady and the Tramp. Lady and the Tramp made me a better man.
A lot of those classics are kind of lost on them. They're falling flat on them right now. I'm surprised at how much they're like, whatever. Like, they get up about halfway through some of these classics that we've put on so far for them.
Like what?
Well, so what did she do? She did the live action Lady and the Tramp. They didn't make it all the way through that.
Yeah, I haven't tried that yet.
I kind of liked it.
I'll give it a shot.
We watched, what was it? The All Dogs Go to Heaven All right, so that's on Disney Plus.
That's on Disney Plus. All Dogs Go to Heaven. Wow.
Wait, no, that's not a Disney movie. Maybe I watched that in the midst of it all. Sorry, I'm mixing it up because of course they didn't want to watch that either.
They didn't like All Dogs Go to Heaven. That one's pretty edgy.
Just because it's just too old looking to them anymore. They want stuff that looks like their YouTube videos and like the stuff they've been watching on Netflix and stuff. It's weird.
60 frames a second. Yeah, brutal.
It's interesting. It's like they just don't. It's like, oh, this is old, Dad. This is old school. Like, if it's Spider-Man or something, they'll be a little bit more into it. They'll give it much more of a fair shake. You know, at least the 7-year-old will. You know, if it's like a character that he is at all invested in, so that helps a little bit. But if it's like, if it's like some old franchise that I loved when I was a kid, but they've never heard of or seen, I usually put it on. I don't have very high hopes because usually they panic like instantly. Doesn't matter what it is.
I want to raise my kids like Old Boy. Just like I'll be like, there is no television. There's no. Have you seen?
Oh my God! Great, phenomenal movies. Both of them. The remake was just as good.
What's that movie about the bear? Mark Hamill bear movie. Brigsby Bear. You need to watch Brigsby Bear. Brigsby Bear is the story of a guy who's raised in a bunker in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. Oh, wow. And then he finds out, and it's Mark Hamill's his dad. And then he finds out it's not really post-apocalyptic. His dad's just crazy. It's really good. Yeah, you gotta see it.
Oh, horrible. Horrible. That's terrible. That's awesome. All right.
I wanted to ask you a question about remote viewing, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Was the title. What do you think about remote viewing?
God, well, so I did look into this recently more closely. We've all heard of it for years, right? I mean, lucid dreaming and stuff like that. Personally, I don't know that I've ever remote viewed for sure, but I have had some, like, I've always had a history of flying dreams personally.
Mm-hmm. Amen to that, man. Isn't that what motivates us all to want to fly?
They're sick. I love them.
Everyone I know who's ever loved anti-gravity propulsion or alternative research like that has shared in the unilateral experience of flying dreams that were significant in their childhood.
That is interesting.
Everyone I talk to.
I don't know about you, but I just floated, right? I just levitate up off the ground when I take off. I don't really like rocket into the air. It's like, oh wait, I think I can fly right now. So
I don't think I've ever heard two people say the same way they fly in their dreams.
There you go.
A lot of the time, though, I do hear the floating thing. I mean, most of the time, it is kind of a floaty feeling. Like for me, I mean, but yeah, okay, fair enough. But probably different for others. Free falling dreams don't seem as fun. It's all about the flying dreams.
Oh yeah, no, falling dreams scary. Always scary. Definitely have had them as well. But so those both, though, the falling dream just as much as the flying dream, like sort of supports the notion that this is possible, like that astral projection or whatever you want to call it in some form might be possible. Because what else are you doing? How else could your consciousness be so removed from your body to have that sensation? I've fallen the fuck out of the top of a bunk bed before because of that. You know what I mean?
Man, no, wait. I have to ask, Beggs, how old were you when you fell out of that bunk bed? Because the same thing happened to me. And I'm just curious before I say.
There you go. No, I was a kid, thank goodness. You know, luckily we get too old to be in bunk beds.
Oh, yeah. How young, though? I mean, like.
Oh, gosh. You know, like a single-digit age, but it certainly was more than once. I've fallen out of that bed a couple times. It wasn't necessarily only by coming back in from a falling dream. But
first time I fell out was, I think, 6 years old, and I think I fell out again at 8.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you get heavier. It gets ouchier for sure.
It certainly does. And I was on the bunk bed is a real pain too, man, because that's quite a distance to go down. When you're a little kid, you just bounce, but man, by the time you reach double digits, you're not doing that and getting away with it so much anymore.
No, for sure. And where I landed, at least in one case, was between the bottom bunk and the nightstand that was next to it too. So you're all folded up in a hole and everything on top of it. It's a pretty bad way to come out of the bed.
That certainly helps.
But you know, I don't know if you've heard of it before, Jeremiah, but there's an interesting declassified CIA doc called the Gateway Process.
And no, I'm not familiar. Please educate me.
So it's a fun one. It's one of those docs that anybody can find on CIA.gov, for example, because they have their, like, whatever you want to call that. They call it FOIA request or declassified or whatever it might be.
I'm sure people are going to want to see links to in this chat, so don't be afraid to provide them.
Right. You know, I don't know how. Do we have, like, Oh, do we have voice or text chat in this?
Yeah, dude.
Oh, yeah, we're live on text chat.
Mine's has its own chat, and then also I'll send you in the Mine's chat or I'll send you, the YouTube. I'll send you in the Discord the YouTube stream, and then you can look at the chat window there because people are sending messages there.
Nice.
Yeah, I've been kind of jumping back and forth between Minds and YouTube the entire time. I got YouTube muted because it causes feedback, which I found out right away.
I closed out the YouTube tab because I didn't want to. I already blew myself out of this conference once. So
yeah, I did that too. We both did the same exact thing. And
I'll look through some of the comments. People have said some cool stuff. They're like, Brett's like, meme Tarek Inception, sup Brit, Morning Sunshines. Let's see, go further on.
That's awesome that people are hanging out.
Yeah, Rick and Morty was dark. Someone agrees. Andreas, cool shorts on the Minds profile pic. Thank you. Bliss, California. Hey, Bliss. Is that Bliss? Like my friend Bliss? Bliss, you're the best. Good to have you, Bliss. And then Maggot, you're beautiful as ever. Monolith, Death Cult, connect the dots. Official video, and then. So check that out. That's Cray. Guys, Cray is the name of a computer company he mentioned earlier. Cray made computers that were C-shaped, so you could connect the wires as close to possible because the fronts and the backs were touching, but then they now make microcircuits, so they're not that big of a deal. But Cray is pretty cool because they're supercomputers that Hewlett-Packard just recently bought. Actually, the division of Hewlett-Packard that purchased them was Tandem Computers, and Tandem Computers was the company that would make strip raid machines that if anything ever broke, there'd always be a second part that would work. Eugenia says, Quantum's rad. Domino's, Spirit Cooking. Yeah, we didn't go into Abramovich. Sorry. Watery. Anyone have tried remote viewing with the 528 frequency hertz? Yes, Twilight Mist. We'll get into the 528s. So, and then put Sia in front of all that. Put Jerry Garcia in front of all that. Get it, Twilight Mist? Okay. So, in response to some of those questions, the first thing I want to say is 528 hertz. If you use binaural entrainment and you listen to interesting sounds, and this is also what mantras are for a lot of the time, you're often able to find the frequency that things are connected with. This is something that Mark earlier, Jeremiah, our friend, was talking about. Subatomic particles that seem to be spinning randomly, they can be aligned. And because they have an originating place, it might be that you can have remote viewing and ethereal experiences just by separating your touch senses. Because your eyes are touch because it's photons, your tongue is touch because it's the drums and the
it's all touch in some form.
Except it's electrostatic, so none of it's touch in any form.
Oh my gosh!
So it's all
quantum.
Check this out. I'm going to send you a link here on the Facebook and Minds chat for anybody who's there. Let's post it both. It's a bit of a long link. It's PDF. This is a remote viewing amplifier, and it's by a guy who you can't really trace back, John Quincy Sinclair. But supposedly you can sit inside this thing, and whatever you're doing for remote viewing, however good you are, this is supposed to make you worlds better and allow you to very easily remote view if you have even the slightest ability. So I'm not sure how much of this is.
No, for sure. Do you think it's like a Faraday cage, like a Faraday cage, or do you think that it's what is it like? The kind of thing that he's inside of?
Geez, let's see. Well, I'm still kind of waiting for this other link to post. I should have probably. In fact, I think I'm going to because I have a feeling that when a bunch of people access this, we don't have very many on the chat. It's gonna bog it down. I should try to find the Google patents.
Yeah, but there's some pretty interesting stuff. Like when I was a kid, my dad gave me this thing he got in the 70s or 80s, which is like a pyramid made out of brass, and it's like a tent poles, and you put it over the bed, and it makes the bed underneath this like metal thing, and you put a Mylar blanket over it, and it's basically like a Faraday pyramid to sleep in. And it's
here we go. So this is a Twitter link. This link actually does load quickly. Try that one.
But the Faraday pyramid also makes your head hurt if you sleep in it, I've noticed. Like if I couldn't do it every night, otherwise I would be still doing it.
You're not the only person to report that. We built a nice 4-foot tall copper pyramid, and I gave a few people a chance to try it, and some experienced a spinning in their head, and other experienced headaches. I don't know if it was that it wasn't aligned correctly to the poles of the earth or what the deal was, but generally I wasn't really getting very much positive feedback from it, although people did have a significant impact on their psychology and sense of well-being. It just wasn't in a good direction. So
what was the material? What was the material in that case? You said? Copper. So maybe a less conductive material might have a effect.
I'm thinking I just didn't align it correctly. I don't know exactly what it was doing to people that were in it, but it may have been something as simple as, oh, I'm uncomfortable with this extra sense of awareness and not being able to do anything with it because it's unfamiliar, or it could have been like a literal discomfort in their bodies. But I find that
stimulation, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, when you give people extra senses of awareness, they're not really sure what to do with them. And if you just stick somebody in a room with nothing else to do, there's an interesting experiment too. There's a research study done where participants were placed into a room. They were told by the researchers that there's nothing to do in this room, but you can wear this wristband and there's this machine, and if you push the button, you'll receive a painful electric shock. And what was it, like over 60% of people decided to push the button and give themselves an electric shock, and a fairly large percentage of those continue to do it over the course of 15 minutes just because it was some input, some stimulus, and they couldn't bear to be in a room with nothing to do, silent with their own thoughts. They would rather electrocute themselves than just deal with their own thoughts in silence. And there's certainly something to that. So we always do seek input in one form or another.
That brings me to a thought I actually wanted to mention. Hold on, let me see if I can full screen my picture here. So when I was a kid, I had some weird toys. Like my dad found this in the 1890s, it's from the 1890s, but it's like it's an electric scalp massager. It's a skin massager. It's called Electropy or something like that.
Electrotherapy. Yeah.
It's like electropoly. It's like electrotherapy, but it's like basically you get these hand blown glass xenon vacuum tube rakes, and the rake combs through your hair and across your face, and you rub this purple xenon gas lit light bulb, and the electricity, how when you touch a bulb with your hands and it rises to it, it's like that, and it shoots your body full of electricity. And there's a number. Let me see if I can get to. There's a couple other windows. It's hard to open them. This guy, is it the same thing? Oh no. There we go. Next window. Application window. That one. This thing right here. This is the one. This one looks more like the one that we had. So you've got this glass tube, except there's one with forks on it, and
yeah, that is your classic induction electromagnetic Tesla coil, or it's not really a Tesla coil. It's more of just a plain induction coil, although it does use small effects of resonance. But
it's like a small Tesla induction coil that connected to the fluorescent bulbs is a medicinal tool and not just some sort of a fun thing. It's not just
that is some really lofty antiquitech right there. Like it had
absolutely
a job.
It was later developed by Raymond Rife and turned into a radio transmission machine using high voltages and a variety of different size coils to produce different resonances that could sympathetically oscillate with human biology and destroy other contaminants that weren't supposed to be in our microbiome.
Do you want to explain a bit about how that works? Like I
can tell you exactly how the technology works on material level. So what he has is a high voltage DC source that sets up the fields. He has something very similar to an X-ray radio tube where it has a plate inside that is at 45 degrees to the output window and another emitter, an electron gun known as a cathode. And so what he does is he modulates the input current to this helium hydrogen filled radio tube using classic AM radio station modulation techniques with radio tubes. So it's sort of a layered thing, but what he'll do is this thing has an electron beam inside of it. When the electrons strike the plate, they convert their momentum into a purely magnetic wave that travels outwards. And when that wave strikes or passes through the human body, it exerts a small amount of the electron momentum that was lost in the striking of the 45-degree angle plate. And this momentum is transferred to anything inside the body. So your cells will pick up the momentum, they'll transfer it through themselves and spit it back out the other side. They're not really affected by this polarization because our cells don't have an electrical asymmetry in the bloodstream, they tend to be pretty neutral, and so they can take these kinds of strong magnetic fields and charges traveling through them. But smaller things like viruses and larger things like bacteria, if tuned correctly, will not be able to handle those strong fields, and so they'll simultaneously combust and remove themselves from your system. And as soon as a bacteria explodes inside of your bloodstream, all of your white blood cells now have instantaneous access to the genetic information that was contained within it. So they go into hyperdrive and they start to attack any other things that have that genetic marker. So what the machine really does is catalyze your body into working on its own. It forces it to, it forces your immune system into hyperdrive and makes it deal with its own issues. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's been so effective, is because the machine itself doesn't do the work. It's your body that does the work, and the machine makes your body start the process of doing its work.
Do you think there's any benefit to using a sort of maybe a monoatomic copper solution, and sort of catalyze it? Would that help your? I've heard really good things about
Rife technology with monoatomics. I do have some monoatomics, but they're not pure one element. I think it's like a 6-element monoatomic. It contains palladium, platinum, gold, copper, and probably at least 2 other elements that are found in Dead Sea salt.
Yeah.
Trace amounts of other ones, but the main ones there would be your platinum, palladium, copper.
Love to see the brand. Send a link also to that. Also,
brand? No, I made it. I made it.
You make your own.
Like 10 pounds of Dead Sea salt in a 6-gallon bucket, and just doing the extraction over the course of about a week.
Oh my guy, that's pretty much.
I'll tell you what, that stuff is
respectable.
I know it wasn't pure, and I know I had probably distillates of lye still left in there, because lye is one of the things that you use. It's an AB extraction. You acidify the compound, you basify the compound, and anything that wasn't turned into an acetate and then into an alkali, it'll drop out of suspension, and you can collect it as like a white kind of fluffy powder at the bottom of your container after you extract it from Dead Sea salt. So I'm sure contaminants are in there, but even with the contaminants in there, I ended up with a test tube of a pretty sharply white, maybe just a little bit ivory colored powder. And when we heated a small sample of that on a spoon, and we heated it to about 400 degrees, it started to float off the surface of the spoon. And I thought at first that this was just moisture. I said, okay, so moisture is leaving. It's forming this strange effect where you have steam evaporating on the surface and the powder is kind of congealing, so it's floating. So I said, well, if it's moisture, it'll evaporate. So I continued to keep the heat steady for about another minute. And at that point, the tiny sample I had, the moisture would have been gone. It was still levitating over the spoon. And by levitating, I mean, you can't really see it unless you look at a real sharp angle. If you were shine a flashlight on one side of the spoon and look at the powder sample that's kind of clumping together, the light does come underneath, but you can hardly see it with the naked eye. However, if you shift the spoon slightly left and right with your hand, you'll see the sample sliding over it almost as if it's floating on water. We heated it more. The sample started to get darker because of the impurities that were burning. The monoatomics obviously aren't going to change their color. And then all of a sudden, the sample lost about 0.3 grams. It was only a 1 gram sample. 0.3 grams is gone. I have no idea where it went, if it evaporated, what it was, but it happened very, very quickly, and it happened after the point that I thought moisture should be gone, right around 600 degrees. We got up to 800 degrees. The sample was now about 25% smaller than it originally was, and bringing it back down did not increase the size of the sample. It looks like some material was permanently lost, and reheating it didn't cause the levitation again. It's like once we got it to about 800, we lost something, and it never came back.
I'd be scared to ask this question to basically like a lot of other people, but since, what do you think? Because I trust your opinion on MMS water, the water that it has chemical bleach, basically, in very, very small trace amounts, which is kind of a recent wave of thing happening.
MMS water, can you, I'm gonna have to look this up because I've never heard that term before.
MMS is pretty much bleach water. It's got dimethyl sulfoxide, very small amounts.
Solution.
And people always say, be careful about bleach, but then they also, how many people have cleaned their water with chlorine and bleach for hundreds of years because it's pretty easy to make bleach.
My opinion on bleach is that it's quite toxic, and there's really no reason to use it. If you consider the purpose A bleach is to what? Purify the water, to sanitize it, to remove other microorganisms. The bleach doesn't just go away. It luckily does evaporate out if you boil the water, but I can't really see any real purpose in it. If you're trying to sanitize your water, why use bleach? Why not use silver? I've used silver for years, and I have people that continue to come back to me again and again and again and again for more silver for various purposes.
Absolutely.
So I really don't see the purpose.
That's my answer. That's totally my answer. I mean, I was curious if you had a different one, basically, because some people have been saying,
I don't believe in bleach. I think it's a horrible thing for your body.
Yeah, I mean, because like, what do you think can be some of the consequences for some of these guys? Are like 80, they're like the pseudoscientists on the internet are eating, like kind of monatomic, quality, like it's small amounts of bleach in their water, but they're doing it on purpose in order to like kill gut bacteria and try to stay. What are some of the dangers you think that are serious? I mean, I've heard of deaths, but like,
one, it's a toxin, so that certainly doesn't help. Two, it's not necessary as far as when it breaks down, there are really no elements in it that your body utilizes to any great degree. So its functional purpose in the body, nutrient-wise, is nil. So first off, it's toxic. Secondly, it has no nutritional value. Why even bother taking it when there's another thing that isn't toxic and also has nutritional value that you could just as well take?
That's such a good answer, to be perfectly honest. It's a better answer than I expected. I mean, like, just in general, nobody's saying like, why are we not eating silver? I guess there was this guy who dyed his skin blue or something in order to freak people out in the 90s on TV.
Well, he didn't do it to freak people out. He just happened to be brewing some really shitty homemade colloidal silver, and it contained very, very large particles. Now, it's well recognized that when you put silver into your body and it's not in a colloidal state, meaning it has no charge, it very quickly will clump up and your body will reject it. So the way that it deals with these particles in the bloodstream is it pushes them out through the epidermis and they collect on the skin. Of course, silver is heavy, it doesn't evaporate, so it just stays there. It doesn't get sweat out with everything else and you can't just wipe it off. So he was taking really poor quality acid-derived silver, and he was not making it with pure water and pure silver like what I do. He was actually adding citric acid into his mix in order to make the water conductive, and using low voltages, which is a really horrible way. If any of you are brewing colloidal silver out there in this audience, never use acids, ever. All you have to do is increase your voltage to about 50 to 100 volts, and all you can use is distilled water. You won't have any problem, but I would recommend heating it, and heating really allows you to get that conductivity through the water that you just couldn't get at room temp. So that's the big secret. We end up with 9 nanometer particles almost every time, or smaller.
You've talked earlier about the Vimanas and stuff. What do you think about blue people? In the Gita, they talk a lot about people that were blue. Do you think that it could be that they were just consuming large amounts of silver to maintain health?
That's a really good question that no one's ever asked me. And quite fascinating. My opinion on it would be no, because the blue man wasn't actually blue; he was quite gray.
True, grays and the grays.
Yeah, if we look across history, everything from the ancient Hindu traditions to other parts of the world where we see blue characters portrayed, but mainly this is Hindu stuff. It's pretty consistent that it's a very type of indigo blue, that it's not this gray. Right. And unless it's all been lost in time, I wouldn't think it'd be the same thing. No.
Baked and Awake, how are you doing for time? I know we've been on for about 90 and you have a family.
Wow.
Well, I'm definitely probably ready to start moving on, just because I got to get out of the house and go do some work.
Word. Is there anything that you wanted to cover while we're on this thing?
No, I've just had a great time chatting with both of you guys. I was going to ask Jeremiah earlier if he's familiar with, and I'm sure he is,
I might not be,
David Lapointe and his work. What is it? The primer fields?
Oh my God, dude. First time I came across that stuff, I was mind blown. Then after watching it several times, I began to develop opinions on it. And he really did discover something pretty fascinating. He discovered a natural symmetry of a field that does exist, and it does explain a lot. The shape of the field emitters that he's postulated only work on a macro scale. It's entirely different on a micro scale. But he did discover the correct shaping of the field. So if nothing else other than to understand sort of how fields interact, it will be a good piece of research for people to investigate. I love the videos. I love the primer fields, and I think it's really fascinating research to look into.
Yeah, I was obviously struck by him. I mean, they did a good job of he took his time presenting it, so you had plenty of time to look at it with him in those videos. And Andreas, are you familiar with these? You know what we're talking about?
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, I love primer fields, and I also love that movie Primer, which kind of is
That's
a
my
narrative
favorite
based
movie,
on
I
it.
think, of all time, man.
Oh, did
Primer
somebody
is
make
great.
a film based on like that kind of notion?
Oh yeah, you got to see Primer. You got to see Primer the movie. Primer 2004 is a film. I'll send you a link. Oh, did I close the window? God, I hope not. Or is it? Oh no, we're okay.
Yeah,
Primer
if anybody out there has to
2004,
see Primer, they've got to watch it, man. What a great film.
It's made for $7,000 by a history and physics teacher in Texas by hand, and his family, his mom did the catering. His friends were in it. And the whole movie is so perfect you wouldn't believe it. You'd think it was a $1 million movie or something. It's not like the greatest film, but it's aesthetically really good because he's like a photographer, so he went around taking photos, and those were the screen storyboards for it. But it's one of the greatest if you're into science and physics and metaphysics and of causality versus non-causality leading to different simultaneously converging dimensions. That, I mean, if you're into that, then you probably like.
How can I say
like
no? You
right
know, at that point, that's awesome. All right, well, I will definitely find that because I feel like I've heard of that film.
We'll probably end up talking about it next time just because we'd be so fascinated with it.
Then I was going to say, I'll trade you guys one recent, like, super indie film that should be pretty easy for either of you to find. I think I watched it on, like, Prime Video, and I think it was a freebie kind of thing. Like, so if you have Amazon Prime, you can watch this without renting it. And it is called Exit. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
What year?
So let me see if here. Let me drop a link for you guys on that.
2019
movie.
Is it Korean?
Nope, it's American by all appearances. Could be Canadian, I suppose. 2006.
Yeah, we're gonna need that link.
Oh, right. It's like Swedish or whatever.
No, that's not it. This is totally not it. That's Mads Mikkelsen and
we're gonna wait for your link, Begged.
Yeah, so
I'm looking online and I'm not finding it.
I do love guessing, but
really simple. Here we go. Science fiction. Yep. Okay, here you go. 2011 it was made. This will be just Wikipedia, so you find it where you will. But simple.
I've seen this. Yeah, this movie's cool. Yeah, this is like it's kind of a metaphysics movie as well.
Yeah, so basically these characters in this movie believe that that the entire world is a giant rat maze, and that any door or one door somewhere, maybe only one, leads to an exit.
Despite all their age, they're still just rats in cages.
So, I think the premise of the movie is the best part about the movie, but I watched the whole thing. I enjoyed it, and I liked sitting there.
I'll definitely check it out because I haven't seen that yet, and it sounds really fascinating. I like the premise, and I think that it's going to catalyze me to think in different ways, which I certainly am all for.
There we go.
Yeah, and in general, guys, we're going to be in the Discord, so make sure you guys come to the Tartaria Nova Discord, although we're watching, and also Jeremiah, please hang out there. Let's start sharing links on anti-gravity and all kinds of things we're not thinking about. Let's think about new things. It's great, and we love you all.
If anybody is interested in this stuff, like I chat with folks all the time that come over to the Join the Technicians Facebook page, and we have pretty in-depth conversations about the tech and how we would implement it. We talk about patents and other things that have existed. So yeah, it's a great place to have a discussion. Just message me and we can start one.
Yeah, man.
And if it gets good, maybe we can live transmit.
Yeah, and for sure, like again, come through the Discord because there's tons of people there that would love to talk about all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, I'll hang around, man.
Yeah, man. Thanks a lot. And then Baked and Awake, Steven, so cool you were here. Also, Jeremiah. Let's do this again very soon.
I was gonna say I hope we can do it again. Thanks, guys. Nice chatting with both of you.
Yeah, man. Peace out.
That was fun. Pretty good, man.